Hello everyone, welcome to GGN. Today is Friday, January 11th, 2013. Okay, I'm going to cover the war on terror, liberty, sovereignty, some Syria news, all about the Middle East. I'll get into the Japan-China little standoff, Pakistan-India standoff, among other news, including South America, and then a little bit of the anti-gun or gun-grabbing, gun control coverage, how I see it, and all kinds of different news. Police state, Big Brother. UK says all options on the table for Syria. World powers will have to step up their response to the Syrian conflict if the violence worsens. Mind you, the world powers are the ones that are creating this conflict and perpetuating it, and they know that. British Foreign Secretary William Hague says, warning that all options are on the table. He reiterated that Britain will seek to amend the EU weapons embargo on Syria when it comes up for review on March 1st, allowing them to arm the rebels opposed to Assad's government. So they're already being armed by Qatar and Saudi Arabia and them, but they're also getting a lot of support from the UK already and the US. We already know that. So it's kind of funny when Hague says this, but for a lot of people, not most, but for a lot of people that watch television, that's the only source of news. They buy this stuff as truth. But the Foreign Secretary warned, given the regime's, and brutality, there is a serious risk that the violence will indeed worsen in the coming months. Well, okay, if that happens, the international community, which is a dictatorship run by private corporations and think tanks, response will have to be stepped up. So, in other words, you're going to keep seeing more articles about floods and refugee camps and the poor refugees and the winter harsh conditions, and they're starving. Oh, the children are starving. So they're creating all the violence. They're creating all this havoc. They're creating all the instability, the degradation of the economy, their social order that they have over there going on for a long time. And they're doing that to put pressure on Assad to step down. So as long as Assad doesn't step down, he's an evil, brutal dictator. Never mind your leaders in the UK or in the US, Australia, anywhere else. That's what you call soft power, and you use humanitarianism, like I said recently, to do it. So it says here, so we will not rule out any options to save lives, protect civilians. So they're actually killing people and starving them, but they're going to go in there and now protect the same people that they were brutalizing. And it says here, in the absence of political transition, i.e. forced regime change in Syria. So Hague's going to ensure that their efforts are legal. Well, they're already illegal, what they're doing, and they're meddling with a sovereign nation and stuff like that. They're probably already violating UN treaties by doing what they're doing, funding terrorists. Okay, and I'll finish up with this, and I'll move on. Encouraging moderate political forces in Syria, which is pretty much a joke, because we all know that that the groups that are going to take over, like in Libya, are going to be far from moderate. What they have there with Assad is moderate. What they're going to get is extreme. So, Syria blasts UN Special Envoy for bias after a call for regime change. So the BBC interview could leave Brahimi struggling to start talks. That's right. He actually said in a quote that Assad's family's been in power for too long. So, yeah, it says here, a little bit too long. So the envoy, a UN Special Envoy to Syria's efforts to kickstart peace talks have been going nowhere fast, but has commented in an interview with BBC, appeared at aiming at courting the rebels may have made it even more difficult for him to get any talks going. So Assad's government officials are condemning Brahimi for the comments, saying his call for the regime change shows flagrant bias against the government, a reaction which was entirely predictable. So it's kind of like Kofi Annan's deal and stuff like that. And the Assad regime's willing to have ceasefires, willing to sit down and talk, but they're not going to be told how to run their country and how to have a transition of power. Syria crisis aims to ensure Israel's security, says Iran envoy. It says the ambassador to Beirut, Lebanon, says plots hatched to escalate Syria crisis are aimed at ensuring the security of the Israeli regime. Developments in Syria proved that, along with public demands for reforms, a plot has been hatched to trigger crisis in Syria in order to maintain the security of the Zionist regime, and the depths of this plot is becoming more evident every day. I included this recently in a report, but I just thought I'd just lay some groundwork here that Israel does benefit from this. They're actually putting up a 45-mile gate or something, or fence, along Golan Heights. Russia to hold major naval drills off Syria's coast. They said on Friday that vessels from the country's Black Sea and Baltic fleets will take part in exercises which are set to be held in the eastern Mediterranean, as the U.S. and its allies plan to deploy missiles on Syria's border, where they're already kind of in the process of doing that. Dutch and German troops, along with German supplying Patriot missiles, which, like we said before, and I agree with commenters too, it could be actually aimed at Iran and Russia. It goes on and says Russia has a naval base in Syria's port of Tartus. Most of you already know that. In 2012, in August, 3 Russian warships performed maritime exercises in the Med. It says the upcoming drill comes as a backdrop of tensions between Moscow and the West over Syria, while Russia has reportedly warned against military intervention in Syria. Western states have threatened to intervene if necessary. Then you have Putin preps Russian Navy for biggest exercise since the Soviet Union. It's about to stage the largest war exercise in a long time. It says here a chance for Putin to show off his military might, of course, but this exercise may also be a subtle warning to the U.S. Stay clear of waters that traditionally lie in Russia's sphere of influence. I believe I just saw an article today. Well, I know I saw an article today that they actually, they just released their nuclear submarine today. So this is in 2004, and they just did it recently. I saw an article, I believe it was from the New American, and I can't find it right now. But either way, it was talking about how the EU is trying to get Russia into this global governance, and who knows if they already are. But, you know, you always have these families like the Romanovs and different families in each country or trading bloc that basically run the show. So who really knows? But for whatever it's worth, I saw this article from the 8th, and it says the end of the EU-Russia relationship as you know it. So the summit in Brussels seemed almost routine. Gas, visas, Syria, and human rights were all on the agenda that proved largely fruitless, yet something is different and no one seems to have noticed. The relations between the European Union and its biggest neighbors are changing fundamentally. The one thing I'll notice when I saw a video of Putin going through European, I'm not sure if it was the same summit, was that, man, he was walking pretty cocky through there, like he didn't even have to be there, but he was just there to appease them. So besides all the financial stuff, austerity measures, it says they are mostly looking across the Mediterranean towards the Middle East and North Africa. Right now, France just launched their first operations in North Africa. Of course, you have Mediterranean, you have Cyprus, you have those natural gas, and basically motivation to go in there and get the gas reserves. So you can go in there and read the article. Links will be posted. You know, I got a lot to get to. But it says until last fall, Europeans believe that President Medvedev was taking Russia in the right directions. So the West liked Medvedev, but then all of a sudden Putin came back, and supposedly Medvedev's a little more leftist or liberal, whereas Putin's more conservative. Okay, next up we have Russian banks should be beware blacklisted Syrian banks, says a U.S. official. Major Russian banks should be aware or beware of dealing with 2 blacklisted Syrian financial institutions, senior U.S. Treasury officials said. Again, this is the international community telling a sovereign nation not to do business with another sovereign nation. Russians' nostalgia for USSR is dwindling, says a poll. And surprisingly, there's still a decent amount of people that are like staunch communists and think Lenin was the greatest person and Stalin, right? It says some 56% of Russians still regret the dissolution of the Soviet Union, according to a poll on the eve of the 90th anniversary. It says here, however, almost 10% less than a decade ago, based on a public opinion poll. A third of Russians do not mourn over the collapse of the Soviet Union 21 years ago. That is 6% more than in 2002. Syria says Turkey is involved in looting. They've accused neighboring Turkey of involvement in looting factories in the industrial city of Aleppo. That's not the only thing that they're accused of. Skyjacking, like I said, kidnapping, and aiding terrorists and supplying terrorists. I mean, Turkey's up there, man. Turkey reaches out to public enemy number 1. So this is from Stratris, their editor's note. Smart move, deal with your internal security issues. Immediately talking about the PKK, Kurdish rebels. The Kurds may be difficult to deal with, but it's possible to come to some understanding or settlement. Iraq doesn't plan on coming to some conclusion, as they have other larger issues. Is this a maneuver that will allow Turkey to ease their fears of Kurd reprisals during military intervention in Syria? Who came up with this idea? All that aside, it's better to know your enemy and their rationale before unexpected events take place. So Turkish intelligence services have held talks with jailed Kurdish PKK leader Direct negotiations may lead to a solution to the Kurdish conflict and end decades of fighting. Then there's this article, Paris murders apparently internal PKK feuds as Turkish prime minister. So I was reading a comment board from Press TV and another article that originally covered this story, saying that it was Mossad, and Mossad's notorious in France, and of course France is where they assassinated or killed Princess Diane. He said on Friday that the evidence gathered so far indicated that the murder had been an inside job, says Erdogan of Turkey. People say it's a very quick and full response, which makes it suspicious. This article was available, then unavailable by McClatchy. Syria rebels seize key airbase in northwest, activists say. So activists are the actual terrorists that are armed activists, really. They're getting help from the West with intelligence and surveys and all that different stuff, technology. U.S. gives Lebanon 200 armed vehicles to Lebanon as part of U.S. military assistance program. It's also to protect borders and internal stability or security. Israel leaves behind traces of genocidal crimes in Lebanon. And this writer goes through there and gives kind of a feature article of his experience there, saying it was beautiful, it was nice, the people were awesome. And he said that this week he saw the exact same Israeli torture facility where the Israelis would shove their political opponents into tiny metal boxes, lock them in for days, and then occasionally hit the top with a heavy stone. This time I took a picture. I remember seeing that video from the guy that made the Pharaoh show about out in Switzerland. They have little Mossad hideouts. You wouldn't even notice them walking down the street. I would just like to get snatched off the street and took in one of there and tortured, man. That would be nice. Pakistan, India clash at disputed border in Kashmir. So the Pakistani and Indian troops exchanged fire on Sunday along with their disputed border in divided Kashmir, which each side is blaming the other for the flare-up, and Pakistan saying one of its soldiers was killed. Pakistan said Indian troops crossed the de facto border known as the line of control and stormed the military post, an accusation denied by other side. It says Pakistani army troops effectively responded to the attack successfully. In a statement, they said one Pakistani soldier embraced martyrdom while another was critically injured. The Indian troops retreated, leaving behind a gun and a dagger. Then you have India to respond to Pakistan's deadly attack on troops, as a foreign minister. He goes on, he says, they will give a proportionate response to Pakistan's recent deadly attack in Kashmir, which claimed the 2 lives of Indian soldiers. We need to do something about this, he said, and we will, but it has to be done after careful consideration. Then you have Indian activists burn Pakistani national flags to demonstrate against the alleged killing of 2 Indian soldiers by Pakistan. I guess that's, not too far off, believable when you see the Indian foreign minister saying it's absolutely unacceptable, ghastly, and really terrible and extremely short-sighted by their part. Similar to the Chinese getting their people to get all riled up and protest and burn Japanese flags over the Sea Islands. Pakistan says soldier killed by Indian troops in Kashmir. So I'm not sure if this is the same story as the other one, but it could be another one. Pakistani army spokesman said the soldier had been killed by an unprovoked Indian gunfire while manning a post. Despite a 2003 ceasefire along the line of control, the area still witnesses violence by both sides, and over the past week, 2 incidences have brought angry protesters from both sides into the streets. I actually just covered this area on December 12th, 2012, exactly a month ago, titled India is a Lapdog Against Asia, or is it? That was a question mark. Got caught some flack with that, but either way, Russia-West ties are inevitable. That was Brzezinski saying that Russia would inevitably become cool with the West if they're not already. That's why I say a lot of it's just a dog and pony show. So you have Afghanistan may be focus of future India-Pakistan rivalry, says U.S. Afghanistan may have direct military support from India, says U.S. India expresses desire for Iron Dome system like Israel. A month ago, U.S.-India military ties can alter the world dynamics, says a think tank. China's maritime strength, major concern for India. India deployed ships, U.S. to back India's leadership role in the Indian Ocean and South Asia. NATO supplies halted as Pakistani truckers go on strike. Basically, the Pakistani government is no longer allowing to contract individually, and they'll have to work for authorized companies. Remember, the U.S. pays the Taliban not to strike their convoys, but the NATO is different. Rockets strike 9 NATO oil tankers in southwest Pakistan. Then you have 125 killed in Pakistan bombings over the last couple days. Secessionist groups have become increasingly active in recent months in Baluchistan, with anger soaring over military ops in the region, which have caused massive civilian casualties. Flurry of drone strikes sets stage for U.S. escalation in Pakistan in 2013 as 6 more have been killed in these drone strikes. This is GGN, and I'm Darko. Thank you.